Okay, welcome back, everyone. It is day 4 of Programming Basics, Thursday the 9th, and we're going to go over more loops this morning, as well as in the afternoon, we're going to go over belt prep and instructions, and then at 3 Mountain Time, we're going to get started with our first exam trial here. So everything that you've done up to this point in the Algo app should well prepare you for the exam. So there's nothing to panic about. Just keep on going with the Algo app. Today we're going to get to level 12 in the afternoon. And at 2, if there's any algo questions that you have that you've dealt with during the app, bring them to the group. We'll do like a group lab where we'll go ahead and explain any confusions that we have with any algorithms. And I'll go ahead and explain what the belt exam entails. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the lesson. Let's do a little bit of review before we do that. Oh, this is the wrong section of the lesson here. We want to go to loops. Okay. Okay, this is going to sound redundant, but we're just going to do this for the sake of learning here. So, if we have an array here, and we're counting the indexes, what index is 0?
0.
Right? So then that means 1 is 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And if we are counting the length, and we have this, sorry?
The length would be 5 instead of 4, right?
Yes, the total length would be 5 because we're counting from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So then, I think that's enough review. Let's go ahead and get on to the rest of the lesson here. That sound is crazy. Let me try to move something around. Okay, here we go. Okay. So we're going to continue on with loops. Sometimes we run into situations where where we may want to end our loop before it would normally end. When this happens, we can use the keyword break. Consider the code below. So we have a variable called length. It's a really big number. Don't ask me to read it. 9999999. And then we have a for loop. Var I equals 0, and while I is less than length, we are going to increase I by 1. I plus plus equals I equals itself plus 1. And for every check that this passes, while I is less than the length, 999999999, it's going to console log hello. All right, so then when we exit this loop, when it finally fulfills this requirement where it's no longer true, the length I is greater than or equal to the length, which is that big number of 9s, we are going to exit this for loop and finally say goodbye. So that's how we exit a for loop. So does anyone have any questions about how a for loop works? It's pretty standard, right?
So
We
the
went over
variable doesn't have to be an array. It can be just a variable.
exactly.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be an array. It can be a variable.
Can it be multiple variables? So like if X and Y, or would that just be more of an array?
So sometimes we can have an array. We can have an array of, let's call it X. And we say X equals 0, 1, 2. Okay. What's the length of this array?
3.
Yes. So length equals 3. So if we start at I at 0 and we say while I is less than X dot length, console log hello, we're just putting this here instead of this area. We're just replacing that. How many times are we going to get a console log hello?
3.
Right. So we're going to get 3 console logs because the length of an array X that we've defined here is 3. So we can make a variable called that length. Okay, that this can be called anything. It can be called X, Y, anything you'd like. And we're just saying, well, I is less than the number value of this variable, increase I.
Josh, I don't want to try to confuse the class any. I was trying to see if you had more than one variable. So let's see, like you had X and you had Y underneath it. It was more of just an extensive mathematical equation. So I
Okay,
understand what you're
I
doing.
see.
So just go ahead and continue going forward. Sorry.
Oh no, let me answer your question. No, in a for loop, we just want to check one variable at a time per for loop here. So if we had another one called length, another one called width, when we're in a for loop, we're gonna just check one variable at a time in this middle section here. Does that answer that?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, great. All right. Don't worry about confusing. If you have a confusing question for the rest of the class, I'll point it out and I'll say let's go over that later. So no worries. From what we've learned about loops previously, we can see that the following code will run a large number of times because the variable length is so large. This might be something that would be undesirable for our program. So we have var length equals 9999999. For var I equals 0, so we say I equals 0. Let's t-diagram this. Oh, that's not straight. That's not straight either. Hold on a second. Okay, that's still crooked, but it works. All right, so we have var in value, and then we say I, we started at 0, and while I is less than length, so we have length, and it's 99999. And then in this for loop, we have an if statement. So every time we run this for loop, we're going to check this if statement, just as we would console log hello in the above for loop. Every time I is less than length, every time I is less than length in this instance, we're gonna run an if statement. And in this if statement, we're gonna check something. So if I is greater than 10, break. So let's go over what a break means. Sorry, did someone say something? Nope. Okay. So we're going to break here, which means we're going to exit. We're going to exit this statement. And so every time we exit, we go back to the previous function, which is this for loop. We run this for loop again while I is greater than 0. Well, at this point, we increased I to 1. So now I is 1. And then we check it again. I is greater than 10. I is not greater than 10. So we wouldn't have broke the first time. I'm just explaining this break here. So this if statement is only going to run once we hit this for loop after the 10th time. Otherwise, it would have console logged hello. So how many times would the console say hello? And how many times will it say goodbye in this instance? Right.
Say hello, 9999999.
Well, no, look, Keithan's got it right here. Every time I is greater than 10, we're going to break. Every other time, we're going to console log hello. So the console is going to say hello for the first 10 times. So it'll say hello, 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 hello until I reaches 10. Actually, well, I is greater than 10. Well, until I reaches 11. So it's going to say hello 10 times because every other time this for loop runs, it's going to break once it reaches 11. Do you need me to explain this again?
No, I'm good. I don't think I would just comment on my own. Is when it breaks, it just restarts it back over again, right?
Yeah, it exits out of
Okay.
that area. Yeah.
All right, then I'm good.
So
Okay.
when it breaks, it's still logging that hello every single time before it goes back up.
No, because it hits this qualifier. So we run the for loop. Well, let's do this again. Var value. Okay, we have I starts with 0. Okay, so while I is less than length is 99 or 99999. Okay, and then we enter the for loop. If I is greater than 10, is I greater than 10 right now?
No.
So then we skip this if statement. This doesn't qualify.
Okay.
So we go to this hello and we console hello.
I gotcha. I get what's going on.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yep, let me just finish it for the sake of finishing it here. So then we go back to this for loop. We increase I. Is I less than length? No. So then we enter in here again. We check again if I is greater than 10. It is not. So we skip this if statement and then we console log hello. And we do this until I becomes 11. Once I is 11, and we have 10 console logs here, once we have 10 console logs and I becomes 11, then this if statement is going to trigger because I is greater than 10. So I is 11, it's greater than 10, so we break. We go back to the for loop, and we do this over and over until we reach the end of this really high number. Once we get a number that's greater than this 9999999 number, then we console log goodbye. So we have 10 hellos and 1 goodbye. Okay, let's get a pulse check here to see how we're understanding this.
Did you say, I'm sorry, did you say you have 10 hellos and then 1 goodbye, or would you have a lot more hellos and then only 1 goodbye once it hits 9999999?
we'd only have 10 hellos and 1 goodbye.
Okay.
That's because this is going to start, this if statement here is going to start triggering once I is equal to 11. Once I is 11, it's greater than 10, so it's going to keep breaking. So it's going to enter this and then exit out of this function and go to the greater area, which is the for loop. So it's never going to hit this console log hello every time it hits this if statement that has a break. Let's test this. It shouldn't take long to test this. So we're going to take this here. We are going to, I know you guys are understanding this, but let's just do one visual here. Let's delete our ice cream man. Run this in here. Did I not copy it?
Hey Josh, can you hear me today?
Yes.
Okay, so the question I was asking is if the break function only works for one statement at a time.
Well, once you break, you exit. So you only need one break per function area.
Yes, that's my question.
Yeah.
And that's only going to work for that one function area, correct?
Yeah, it's only gonna, because if you have a second break below, it's not gonna reach the second break. It's gonna exit out once it hits the first. Yeah. It's like a return, except the return returns a value to the function.
Right.
A break just exits out. So for loop function. Okay.
Josh, can you repeat that again? I'm trying to take a note on that because break and return are so similar. Can you say that again? Break just exits the statement you said, and return restarts the function, right?
Yes. So this if statement is within the for loop, right? This for loop begins and ends on line 22 and line 27. So as soon as you exit this, as soon as you break, you exit the if and go to the function that's encapsulating it. So it won't reach this hello. Let's go ahead and test this so we get a visual here. So I'm going to run this. Return returns the value that you're giving to that function. Right, Mike? It's going to return a value. So if you say return something, it's going to exit out like a break and give the function the value that you're telling it. But a break just exits. It doesn't return anything to the function itself. Okay, so we have our length defined. We're about to read I. I is 0, while I is less than length. And that is true. And now we're going to check if I is greater than 10. Is I greater than 10 right now? It's not. So we don't trigger this if statement, and we go straight to this console log. Okay, then we run the for loop again. We've increased I to 1. Is 1 less than length? It is less than length, but it doesn't trigger this if statement because I is not greater than 10. So we are going to console log hello again. Hello is triggered. So now we have 2 hellos in our console. Okay. And we're going to do this all the way until I reaches 11. And that means that we're going to have 10 hellos in our console. So let's see this happen. 3 hellos, I equals 3. 4 hellos, I is 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and our 10th hello. Okay, Now I is about to turn into an 11, and let's see what happens now. 11, it triggers into this if statement now, and it's now going to read this if statement to see if I is greater than 10, and it is, so let's see what happens. We hit the break, and now what happens? We console log goodbye. Because in this instance, whatever I is going to become, it's 11. So it's not going to run the for loop anymore. It knows that it needs to exit. So it will trigger goodbye now. And we get a goodbye to our console. Should I run this again? Let's run it again. Let's see how the break works. Okay, I is 2. Yep. So Justin asked, so if the break breaks the loop, will the loop ever reach, will I ever reach 9999999? Well, let's take a loop at our T diagram here. As soon as it reaches 11, oh, Siri's trying to talk to me.
It's only asking for the length of the numbers, not the actual 9 million, whatever, right?
Right.
No
So
longer even.
so after it hits 11, I no longer increases. We exit out. We exit out of this whole entire section. This whole for loop here from 22 to 27 is exited. And we go straight to our console. We're still within the function, this for loop function, but we exit the for loop and go to console log goodbye. Let's do another.
And that ends the function, right?
Yep, that ends the for loop. Yep, and after this console log is finished, now the function is finished. Yeah. Let's get another pulse check here. I just want to make sure we're grasping this. Carlos is asking 4999 because the length.
I think that length is confusing here. Like you could change that variable to anything. It could be banana or giraffe. You know, the length is not like the dot length method that we use normally. It's just
right. We can change this to X, and it's not measuring the length of an array. It's just called length. The variable name is just called length. Okay, it's not the length of an array, it's just called length. It just happens to be called what we measure an array.
Oh,
it doesn't matter what number is there really. It's going to stop at 10 every time because it just hits that break when it gets to 10. When I is equal or greater than 10, it hits that break. The break stops the loop, so I will never increase any more than that. If we took that break out, it would go to 99999 or whatever.
Right.
Thanks, Joe.
Yep. Thanks, Joe. Okay. And this time the loop will only run 10 times. When I becomes greater than 10, the loop will encounter the keyword break and end right then. While we may not need breaks frequently in our code, it can be a useful tool for our toolkits. Just to have another tool in our toolkit. Okay, break is something that, like it says here, I haven't had to use it very many times, but it's there. Okay, so now let's go ahead and move along here. All right. We've seen the elements of an array may be referenced by their indexes. We have also seen that we can determine how many elements are in an array by accessing the built-in length property. These are using these ideas of indexes and array length, we can actually use a for loop to iterate through an array and look at every element. We can set our loop variable to start at 0, the first index of an array. We stop when we reach the length of an array. Each time the loop executes, we now can access an element in the array by that index. Okay, so here we have an array. It's just called R. We can call this X or Y, or anything we'd like. We can call an array anything we'd like by the variable name, but here we just called it R, just so we know what we're dealing with. Var R, and it's an array of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So what's the length of this array? Five, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and write it down so we don't forget. We have a var val, and we have I equals 0. Oh my gosh. Well, actually, let's start with R because that's the first array, first variable we see. R equals 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay. And then we have I, and I equals 0. And then we come here, r dot length. So what is r dot length? R dot length is 5. Okay. And then we console log I while I is less than r dot length, which is 5. And we also console log R at position I. So when I is 0, what is R at I?
2.
So R at I, okay, at the first position, who said, did someone say 2?
I did.
Okay, thank
Is
you.
that right?
Yep, because remember when we count indexes, we count 0, 1, 2. So I at 0, R at I, which is 0, that value is 2. And then once we make these two console logs, we increase I by 1. I equals itself plus 1.
Okay, so this is abiding by the array function then. That's what I needed to know.
Right, now this is why I've been testing us on the difference between the index and the length. How we count indexes is different than how we count length. We start from 0 with indexes, and length we start from 1. The length is 5, but R at I is 0, and so we get the value 2. Okay, then we increase I equals I plus 1, so then I becomes 1. And then we enter into this for loops function area, and we say console log I. So our console right now, I'm going to make our console above here, running out of space. Console log I. So the first console log was going to be, let's backtrack here. What was the first console log? Console log I the first time.
First console log I at 0, which in turn would be 2. If you add 1, I'm assuming it would then go to 4.
Right, but then we after we console logged I, then we console logged R of I. So what was R of I again?
RI and the first one was 2.
Right, so we console log 0, 2, and then the next iteration it becomes 1.
Which
And
would
then
in turn would go ahead.
Yep. Go ahead.
Oh, which would make it 4 then, right? Because you're
Right.
still okay.
So 0, 2. You guys get the pattern here? 1, 4.
Add 1 again, it would go to 6.
Yep, and then it becomes 2, 6. So we have I is 2, R of I is 6. And then it becomes 3, 8.
And then, go ahead.
3, 8. And then it becomes 4, 10. Right? Then we make this 4, this 10, then we console log 4, 10. And then what does I become?
5.
5. So once I is 5, and I'm writing it a little bit below here, so ignore, this is just for I section. Once I is 5,
Does
is
it end
5,
it?
yes, because is 5 less than R dot length?
At that point, it would be, yeah.
Okay, let me
No,
ask
it's not.
again. Is
Oh,
is
no, it'd be greater, sorry. At 5, it'd be greater.
5 is equal to R dot length, because R dot length we determined right here is 5. So 5 is equal to 5, so that means that we're going to exit this for loop. And that's done. So I increases to 5. Once I increases to 5, it's finished. We no longer console log. So the only thing we have in our console is 0, 2, 1, 4, 2, 6, 3, 8, 4, and then 10. Maybe I should put commas between each here. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay. I'm gonna quiz you. Go ahead.
If you, after the end of the code block bracket for the for loop, console logged I once more, it would come out as 5, correct?
Right, but we wouldn't enter into the for loop bracket because yeah. If we increased it to, if we made it I is less than or equal to R dot length.
No, I'm asking specifically, like, since it iterated off of I when I was 4, the value that I holds is 5, even though it doesn't execute the loop again. But if you
Right.
chose to console log I outside of the loop, it would log it as 5.
Exactly.
Correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
It wouldn't exist anywhere, is what it is. It ceases
Oh.
to exist essentially as soon
Yes.
as the for loop breaks.
Yes,
So
I got mixed up. Joseph is right. Once you exit the for loop, I no longer exists. If we were somehow able to access this for loop's I, then yeah, but no, we cannot access the I once we exit this for loop function. Once we exit this area that begins and ends here. Thank you, Joseph. Yep. That is true.
So
I
if
is
we
no
put-
longer accessible.
If we put that in trace, we would not see 5 pop up in trace, then, correct?
Well, trace would increase it to I. We would see the T diagram where I increases to 5, but we couldn't access it in the area below or outside of this for loop.
there's like nowhere where the interpreter would get an opportunity to see it. Like it's gonna switch that I and immediately do that condition. And so it only exists as long as it iterates up, it checks that condition, and then I just pretty much vanishes because it fails that condition.
Right.
So
So
we don't
for a
really
brief
ever
moment.
have an opportunity to do it. But Trace can see that, it'll show it probably, but that they probably went like out of their way to make that happen, you know. So
Yeah, so Spencer, if you define I as a variable before the loop, wouldn't it survive the loop?
that's what I was thinking. I think you could just make a loop like a variable before that, and then if you iterated that, then it would persist, right? Because it's all about like scope. We're kind of
Yes.
getting ahead of the material, but you create that I variable inside of the scope of the for loop. So when you break the for loop, it ceases to exist. But if you had it in an outside scope and just iterated it, then you'd still have access to it. Like theoretically, I'm not sure if you could even do that, honestly, if you can iterate a variable that is
I think we
previous.
could. Yes,
Yeah.
I don't want to get too complex and then miss the point of this here. It's very simple. We just want to iterate through an array's length value, but we
Yeah.
could define another variable and say I is equal to that variable, and then it would increase. Well, then actually no, because if I were to increase, it's still I is just going to be accessible only within this for loop. So it would increase it. And as soon as it realizes it cannot do anything with that, once it does not fail, it doesn't pass this middle parts check, then it's gonna exit.
Thank you.
So let's go ahead and do some more here, and then I'll get a pulse check here. So I'm going to copy this on a note, and then I'm gonna write it on the notepad. Oh, it's not company. Hey, come on. Okay, let's go to trace. And then if I paste this in here, let's do a little run here, and then I'm gonna change things around. Okay, here we go. So R is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I is going to be red right now. It's 0, and so it's less than R dot length. This T diagram, I don't think it's going to show R dot length, but we know it's 5. So we console logged I, which is 0, and we're going to console log R at I, which is going to be 2. So we get the 2 there. And then we run through it until we get all the console logs we desire. 1, 4, 2, 6, 3, 8, 4, 10. And then once I equals 5, I is equal to R dot length. 5 is equal to 5. So this is no longer going to pass. And we exit. Okay, let's get a status check on how to iterate through an array. Okay, let's do something different here. This is like a bonus question here. All right, so we have var R equals 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, and then we have a for loop for var I equals 0. And I'm going to leave this space empty. I'm going to leave this space empty. And then I'm going to start the for loop. Actually, you know what? Let me erase something here. Let me restart it here. This is important. Var R equals 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, let's just name the objective here. I want to iterate through this for loop, but I want to do it backwards now. I want to do it from right to left. How do I do that?
You're gonna have to bracket the equation, go in the
Would you run it the same condition through, except start at the maximum of the length and then iterate I decreasing by 1 each time?
Yes. That's the way we want to do that. Did you guys hear that?
yeah,
We want to
nice,
start
Mike.
we want to start at this position here, and we want to move this that way. And instead of increasing I by 1, we're going to decrease I by 1. So let's try to write a for loop doing that now. For var I equals, okay, now what are we going to say?
5.
No, we already said I. What is going to equal?
5
Okay.
-1.
or 10.
Okay, well,
R length -1.
yes, thank you. We're going to say I equals R dot length -1. Why is that?
You can apply that to any array instead of a
Yes.
specific number.
Yes, because let's say we have a really long array. Let's say it's like, it's really, really long. Okay. And instead of giving the specific position that it's at, instead of counting all the digits and finding out how long it is and saying, give us the nth digit, the 1001 digit, we just want the computer to read it for itself and give us this position. So what is r dot length again in this situation?
Five.
The length of the
It's equal to 5. Okay. And if we count the index positions, we start at 0, right? So we count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we say 5, 5 is outside of the array now. So if we say r dot length -1, what does that equal?
4.
Right? Okay, so that is going to give us this position at index 4. So we're starting here. So that is how we start at the very end. We say r dot length -1 because we count from.
tricky.
Yep. And that's why
It's
I've been trying to
tricky.
test you guys with this. Okay, so there's the length and then the index position. The index position is 1 less than the length. And so we are going to start at r dot length -1, which is here at 4. And while we start there, then what's our next checker here? I'm just going to write it in the line below. Here's where we do the greater than or less than sign. So what are we going to check? If I is what? While I is what?
Should be less than or equal to the length, the r dot length, right?
Well, so what is the length right now? It's 5.
5, yeah.
And so
So-
if we say while it's less than the length, right? If we say while I is less than the length. Well, we're saying while I is less than 5, and we want to decrease I, right? So we're going to say
Yeah.
I minus minus. Right now, what is I when we start?
Well, you start, it's 5.
So it's r dot length minus 1, so it's 4.
Oh, yeah, that's the
so-
variable. Okay, yeah.
So what we're saying here, well, if 4 is less than 5, decrease I.
Yes.
So then we decrease it to 3, and then we check again. While I is less than length. And so at what point are we going to stop?
Oh, never.
Right. So we have to check what then?
The um
Well, until I equals 0.
Yes. So now we're flipping it around. Before we said var I equals 0. Now we're saying var I equals r dot length minus 1. And now we're saying while I, so scratch this, while I, let's scratch this too. While I is greater than 0.
Could you
What?
do while I is greater than 0 and I is less than 5?
No, we can only check one thing at a time.
It'd have to be equal to 0 too, right?
Yes. So we want it to equal to 0 because we don't want it to stop at 1. So while I is greater than or equal to 0, I minus minus. And then we can console log here. Console.log I and console.log R of I. Remember, this is the bonus question here, so don't get frustrated if this is gibberish still. So I'm going to just write this down and then copy it into our trace here to do a check.
Justin wants to take a picture of the screen first,
Okay.
and anybody else. I just for
I mean, I can try to snip it. I just been having the darndest time. I've already Googled it, but for some reason I have an HP desktop all-in-one. I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with the Logitech keyboard I'm using. I'll try to figure it out. I'll just do a sticker for now just to save time. I know we have a lot to get over, so I'll just do that.
Are you on Windows 11?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, you guys handle that. I'm just copying the code so that I can paste it into trace.
Press Shift Windows key S to screenshot.
hey, look at that. I don't even know that one.
I heard something there.
Yeah, that was me playing with the screenshot. I took a picture of all 3 of my monitors. That was pretty cool. I didn't even know you could do that.
Did someone say window key S?
Shift window key S.
Shift window key S thing.
Didn't copy it. Okay. Make some edits here.
Does anyone else live in Washington, or is everyone else Mountain Time too?
I am in Central Time.
Oh, Central.
Okay. All right, here we are. So we have our for loop. We have our variable r, and we're saying var I is equal to r dot length minus 1. So this is going to be at this position, while I is greater than or equal to 0, which is going to be at this position, I minus minus. And for each iteration, we're going to console log I and console log the index in the array of I. So let's go ahead and run this now. And this will be the end of the lecture. Okay, so now we're about to read array. Okay, we've got our array in our T diagram here. And now we are going to read I. We said I is r dot length minus 1. So here we are at index 4. That is at position 10. Because we read 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we say, while I is greater than or equal to 0, it is 4 is greater than or equal to 0, console log I. So we got 4 and console log r at I, which is 10. It's still greater than or equal to 0. So then we've decreased I to 3. It's still greater than or equal to 0, console log I, and then console log r of I. So then we have 3 and 8. We've decreased I again to 2. While it's greater than or equal to 0, still true. We're going to console log I, then r at I. 2, and then 6. We've then decreased it to 1. I is now 1. Okay, then we're going to console log I again. It's going to be 1, then 4, because 4 is at index 1. And now we're going to do it the last time we say I is equal to 0. 0 is equal to 0, so we're going to console log this again. Index 0, and then 2. Once I is negative 1, we've decreased it again. It no longer qualifies this middle section of the for loop. So then we exit the for loop. And that's how we read an array backwards to forwards. From the end to the beginning. Okay, let's get a status check on this. Great. And that's all we need to know for today's lecture. So now we're going to take a 10-minute break, and we are going to regroup here again and go over our assignments for the day. So let's go ahead and start that.
When will the belt exam be open?
At 3 today. 3.
Are while loops on the belt exam?
We'll go over that at 2.
Okay.
Okay.